She looked me in the eye and said, "You don't get a say in my life." So I sold the house, packed every box of her things, and took back my freedom while she lost everything. I am 35, and a few years ago I took one of the most important steps of my life. I bought my first house. It was not a mansion, nor some grand estate, but it was mine. A 3-bedroom place in a suburban town just outside of Denver, Colorado. The kind of home that had enough space to breathe but still needed constant care. The lawn always grew faster than I could keep up with, the garage needed sorting, and the mortgage was large enough to take a healthy bite out of every paycheck I earned. But still, every brick and beam belonged to me. I signed the papers alone. I carried the keys into my hand alone. And when I crossed that threshold for the first time, I knew that it was my sanctuary. Nobody else could claim it. Nobody else could say they earned it. I have always been a quiet man by nature. I do not need crowds or noise to feel alive. I find comfort in routine, in the familiar rhythm of my days. Owning that home was my dream achieved. A safe place to return to, a space that reflected my effort and sacrifice. For the first time in my life, I truly felt rooted. That was before Melissa entered the picture. Melissa was 29 when I met her. She was everything I was not. Outgoing, lively, always on the hunt for the next new thing. She knew every trendy restaurant downtown, every bar that had just opened, every hidden spot in the city where something exciting was happening. Where I preferred quiet nights, she pulled me into a world of noise, lights, and constant movement. And at first, I loved it. She was a spark I didn't realize I was missing. With her by my side, the city felt less like a place of stress and more like a playground. We dated for about a year before things escalated. Melissa was still living in an apartment with roommates, paying too much rent for too little space. When her lease was close to ending, she floated the idea of moving in with me. At first, I resisted. My independence was precious to me, and I wasn't sure I was ready to share my space permanently. But Melissa framed it as practical, logical even. Less money wasted on rent, more time together, fewer logistics. Slowly, I convinced myself that it was the right step, so she moved in. But here's the key detail: it was my house. My name on the deed, my hard-earned money covering every mortgage payment, my sweat spent on weekends mowing, repairing, and upgrading. Melissa simply brought herself and her belongings into a space that already existed, into a life I had already built. At first, things were good. Melissa had a way of brightening the place. She decorated with candles, added small touches, brought life into corners I never thought about. For a while, it felt like a real partnership. But slowly, cracks began to appear. Melissa's love for shopping was not casual. It was a lifestyle. Every evening, boxes from Amazon and other stores piled up at the doorstep. Clothes, shoes, makeup, kitchen gadgets we didn't need, seasonal decorations for every holiday on the calendar. The deliveries never stopped. I tried to brush it off at first. After all, I wasn't broke, and maybe this was just her way of settling in. But the spending was just the beginning. Our schedules were different too. I worked early hours, up at dawn, home by evening. Melissa worked late shifts, which often turned into late nights out. More and more frequently, she would come home at 3 or 4 in the morning. Sometimes she offered explanations, drinks with friends, after-work hangouts, but her tone was always dismissive. I wanted to believe her, and for a while I did. But something inside me began to shift. The first real red flag appeared one night when she left her phone on the coffee table. A notification lit up the screen, an Uber receipt. The pickup address wasn't her workplace or any nearby bar. It was an apartment complex across town. The drop-off? Our house. At 6 in the morning. When she came out of the shower, I asked her calmly. No accusations, just a question. She rolled her eyes, laughed almost, and said, "You're being paranoid. I just crashed at a coworker's place after work. We had a late shift, and I didn't feel like driving home." She dismissed me, made me feel foolish for even asking. Then she delivered a line that cut deeper than I realized at the time. "You don't get to police me. We're not married." That moment should have been my wake-up call. But I stayed. I stayed because I thought love meant compromise, because I didn't want to seem controlling, because I still loved her. Months passed in that uneasy rhythm. Her shopping, her late nights, my silence. And then came the day that changed everything. I had invited some neighbors and a couple of coworkers over for a barbecue. A simple Saturday afternoon, burgers, drinks, laughter, music. Melissa thrived in that environment. She was loud, charismatic, the center of attention. At one point, someone half-jokingly asked about wedding plans. Before I could even react, Melissa, a few drinks deep, laughed loudly and said, "Oh, please. He knows he's just my backup until I find someone better." The entire yard fell silent. People looked at me with awkward glances, unsure if it was a joke or something darker. I kept flipping burgers, pretending it didn't matter, but inside, something broke. That night, lying in bed beside her as she slept peacefully, I stared at the ceiling and faced the truth. I had given her my home, my space, my trust, and she saw me as nothing more than a placeholder. Not a partner, not someone she respected, just a backup. And that's when my hurt turned to clarity. I wouldn't yell or argue. I wouldn't beg for respect. I would take back what was mine. From that night forward, I began to plan. I researched tenant laws in Colorado. The facts were clear. Melissa had no legal claim to my house. She didn't pay rent, didn't pay bills, and had no name on the deed. Once I knew that, the rest was simple. I contacted a realtor. The market was hot, and houses were selling quickly. Within weeks, I had serious offers. Melissa remained oblivious. While she was out partying, I was quietly signing papers. While she slept, I boxed her belongings and placed them in a storage unit. Clothes, shoes, makeup, even her beloved ring light. Everything neatly packed and accounted for. The night before the closing, I finally sat her down. Calm. Direct. I placed a folder on the table containing the closing papers and storage receipts. "Melissa," I said, "I sold the house." First, she laughed like it was a joke. Then she realized I was serious. "You can't do this. You don't get to make that decision without me." I met her eyes and replied, "It was never our house. It was mine. You told me yourself we're not married. You don't get a say." Her face crumbled. Anger, then panic, then desperation. She yelled, she threatened, she cried, she begged. But I stayed calm. By noon the next day, she collected her belongings from the storage unit. She walked out without saying goodbye. First, she tried to ruin me. She posted on social media, painting herself as the victim and me as the abusive villain. Her friends attacked me online. But I had proof. The recording of her own words at the barbecue. Every time someone messaged me, I sent them that clip. Her lies collapsed under the weight of her own voice. Melissa spiraled after that. She bounced from friend to friend, wore out her welcome everywhere. Eventually, she returned to Arizona to live with her mother. Word reached me that she was working small jobs, still shopping, still blaming everyone else for her misfortunes. As for me, I closed on the house, took the profit, and bought a smaller townhouse downtown. Peaceful, manageable, mine alone. I adopted a German shepherd named Max, filled my home with things that reflected who I was, and rebuilt my life. Neighbors still mention the barbecue sometimes, telling me they couldn't believe how calmly I handled it. But the truth is, my calm wasn't weakness. It was strength. It was clarity. Melissa thought my silence meant submission, but really it meant calculation. And in the end, it gave me freedom. Today, I sit on my patio with Max at my side, the grill smoking gently, and I feel something I haven't felt in years. Peace. No drama.
No das respect.
Just a home that is truly mine. And that, to me, is victory. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more content.